To today's program, and I am at the NRB convention in a place you may have heard of called Orlando, and I'm with a gentleman who has recently left Orange County to go to Denver. His name is Brian Bird, and Brian is one of the most prolific screenwriters that you'll ever find. So Brian, thank you for being on the program.
Thanks, Dan. It's an honor to be with you again.
Now, you have just written the screenplay for a movie. And what was it called?
It's called The Case for Christ, which is releasing nationally April 7th, the Lee Strobel story.
Now, tell us a little bit briefly about the story and then how you got involved.
Well, Lee Strobel, who many may know from his book, which is this is an adaptation of The Case for Christ, was a high-profile young journalist working for the Chicago Tribune back in the late 70s, early 80s. And he was an atheist, a hardcore atheist, devoted skeptic, and wanted to live his life based on facts and truth. Yeah. That's all he cared about. Well, his wife, Leslie, who I believe you've been talking to today as well, she became a Christian at Bill Hybels' new church, Willow Creek, back in the early days of Willow Creek. And she came home and announced to her atheist husband, I'm now a Jesus follower. And he decided that he was going to rescue her from the Willow Creek cult. And the way to do that would be to debunk Christianity so he could save her. Yeah. Because they had a loving, happy, hedonistic, atheist marriage, and he didn't want that to change. And so Lee set on a journey as this very prolific and honored journalist. He was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize at a young age, incredible journalist for the Chicago Tribune. He set out on a quest to undercut, to undermine, to prove that the resurrection and the crucifixion could never happen, because the resurrection is the Achilles heel of Christianity. If it didn't happen, the whole thing is a house of cards. And he knew that. And so he went and began to interview the world's leading experts on the manuscript stream of the ancient antiquity, ancient manuscripts, of the eyewitness accounts of Jesus after the crucifixion. Nearly 500 separate incidents of people witnessing him that were recorded in history. They're not just biblical, sources on this. There's outside the Bible sources that he was able to, that were revealed to him. And so he went about this whole quest to undermine her faith, and at the end of the day, he couldn't. He realized that the evidence was too overwhelming, and he said, there's too much here not to believe. But what really happened at the core of that relationship is that Leslie loved him over also. The change in her life as a new Jesus follower caused her to change and to love on him more. And so at the end of the day, he said, the evidence for your faith is overwhelming, Leslie, but it was you. You didn't give up on me. And I don't think God gave up on me either.
So how were you approached, and how did you get the research? Did you sit down with them and interrogate them, or what?
So for anybody who's read The Case for Christ, they know that it's a compendium of 13 world-class experts talking about this deep dive into the evidence for Christianity. And it's if I could use this term, a data dump. It's so much information that when I read the book, I said, there's no way that we can turn this into a narrative movie, right? A feature film, narrative movie, scripted movie. So I said to my friends at PureFlix who wanted to make this movie, I said, we have to tell a relationship story as much as we tell the data dive story. And so I kidnapped Lee and Leslie Strobel in my office, basement office, for 4 days. And I did a deep dive into their story, and I asked them every question. I probed. I used to be a journalist as well, and I did a journalistic inquiry into who they were and their life. And I'm telling you, they have a powerful, powerful love story in the middle of this whole case for Christ. And that's what I love so much about how the movie has turned out, is it's a powerful love story between a man and a woman who love each other, but who are mismatched spiritually. And Leslie prays and loves him over while he's trying everything he can to get her out of the cult.
So you've got all the research, you've got the book. How do you then turn that into a screenplay?
Well, I tell you, when you look for pillars as a screenwriter, I looked for pillars of storytelling, and there were several streams that were just perfect for this. We knew we had the expert stream, right? We had our choice of 13 of them. We ended up using 5, on camera. But then I had to look for some personal storytelling pillars. One of them is the love story. That was huge, and that's sort of the spine of the movie, is this love story between a man and a woman. But there's another story between Lee and his father in this movie, because Lee had a huge father wound. And what he learned as a result of his research is that all of the most famous atheists in history had father wounds, all of them. You can't name one of them, of the leading atheists, that didn't either have a father who died when they were young, were taken from them very young age, who were cold to them, or abusive even to them, or had abandoned them. They all had that in common, and Lee discovered that all his great heroes of atheism all had huge father wounds, and so did he. So that was another fantastic storytelling pillar.
So, how did you illustrate that?
We have a relationship story with his father in the movie. This very strange relationship, and without giving too many spoilers away, because this comes out April 7th, and I don't want to tell the whole movie today, but Lee's father passes away without Lee ever being able to reconcile with him. And it becomes a very poignant stream in the story. Right. There was another parallel journalism story, story that he was pursuing as a reporter at the Chicago Tribune, that he didn't think had anything to do with his quest to debunk Christianity. It was just a cop shooter story. Yeah. And he ended up realizing that he had mischaracterized the story about this young African-American man who looked dead to rights, guilty for having shot a cop. But Lee realized that he missed the story. And that's another storytelling stream in this, because it dovetails with his own story.
I'm intrigued because, I've done a little bit of fiction, but what's the big difference between a screenplay and a novel?
Well, when we're telling a true story, that this is, I'm adapting a true story and a book for the movie. The difference is that you try to be as loyal, as devoted as you can to the true story aspects, right? You want to tell as much of the true story as you possibly can if it fits a movie structure, a 3-act structure. Now, sometimes life is inconvenient to a movie structure, right? It doesn't work well. It doesn't fit the paradigm that you need. So, in that case, and this may come as a shock to some people, but you don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. Now, that's totally opposite of what I was trained as a journalist. Yeah. But I'm making a piece of entertainment. I'm not making a documentary. Right. If I was making a documentary, yes, you just let the truth happen however it happened, and you let people take away from it what they will. Yeah. But when using the Aristotle's principles of drama and 3-act structure, sometimes forces you to change chronology of events, or to create composite characters and things like that. Sure. So sometimes you must take dramatic license with certain stories. I would say with Lee and Leslie Strobel's story and The Case for Christ, it might be 10% license. The rest of it just all happened. and it's gold for a storyteller like me. It's just gold, right? It plays as a thriller. It plays as a great love story. It plays, I tell people, I said, if you saw the Da Vinci Code, you're going to love this movie because it does exactly what the Da Vinci Code didn't, but it has the thrill ride of the Da Vinci Code.
That's great. Now, last time we talked, Brian, you had been very much involved up in Canada with a series there set, I believe, in British Columbia, is it? Alberta now. And it's called?
It's called When Calls the Heart. And it's on the Hallmark Channel. It literally just started season 4 on the air with the Hallmark Channel, and 5 million people are watching us every week. It's amazing.
Well, I know my wife watches it, and you have these like fans called the Hearties. Tell us about them.
So, a lot of television shows that are on today and going back a ways have their fan groups, right, that show up and love the show. Well, we have, because it's called When Calls the Heart, based on a Jeanette Oak series of books, we have the Hearties. And the Hearties are Trekkies on steroids. They are in fact, I met with a group of them here in Orlando last night. Had dinner with a group of Hearties. They meet, they have community. There are hundreds of thousands of them now on social media, and they talk to each other. They pray for each other. They have meals together. It really has become, in a way, like church, right? A version of church, because many of them are starved to death for faith and family-friendly content on television that doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. There used to be a day, Dan, when you and I could sit down and watch TV with our families every night, and there would be something appropriate for us. Nobody is making this anymore. And the Hallmark Channel is one of the few channels and networks that has devoted itself to doing faith and friendly family programming. Well, there's a reason why 5 million people are watching this every week, is they're starved to death. They're on a desert island and nobody's given them food anywhere else, and we are. Yeah. And so they are loyal and they are loud, the Hearties, and they trend on Twitter. Many of them are lovely ladies in their senior years who love this program, probably much like your wife, and they teach each other how to go on Twitter and tweet and get us trending on show night. Yeah. We're just a little show on the Hallmark Channel. We're trending nationally.
And I understand that they've learned how to persuade Hallmark to keep running the series. How do they run these campaigns?
You know what? So after the first season, right? You never know if you're going to get renewed. In the TV business, you do your best and you try to get the numbers up as much as you can. But the Hearties, at that time, there were 4,000 of them on Facebook. They collected hearts from across the country and strung them together with string, ribbon. And they sent boxes and boxes of hearts with messages on them. Please give us more When Calls the Heart. We love we love the Hallmark Channel. We love When Calls the Heart. And they sent them to the network, and the network strung them around their office. Yeah. So that was the first salvo in the Hearties, working to get us to get more Hallmark, get the more When Calls the Heart from the Hallmark Channel. Well, we're now in season 4, and it's hitting a tipping point this year. We're growing even more than we ever thought we could.
Now, when I first met you, Brian, you were working for World Vision, I think doing their PR and everything. How did you make the switch from PR and World Vision to what you're doing now?
Well, when I was at World Vision, I had been a journalist much like yourself. I wasn't on Fleet Street, but I was in whatever street in Southern California. And so I sort of morphed into my work at World Vision by working on the magazine, and then that sort of began to encompass more media and PR work. And while I was at World Vision, my wife's great uncle, a man who's left us now, but he's was a famous TV writer and producer, Don Ingalls, goes back to the golden age of TV. He had read some of my journalistic journalism and my magazine pieces, and he said, you're a good writer. Have you ever thought about writing for film or TV? And I said, I've always been a consumer, but I've never thought about writing for it. So he gave me some scripts, and he showed me a couple of books, sort of the Bibles of learning how to be a screenwriter, and said, you should try it. And he was writing and producing an old show that you'll remember, but very few younger people will, called Fantasy Island.
Oh, yeah, sure.
De Plane, Ricardo Montalban.
Yeah.
And I wrote a spec episode of Fantasy Island back when I was 25 years old, and it was at World Vision.
Yeah.
Took a week of vacation to do it. And he loved it so much, they hired me to write an episode of Fantasy Island. And that became my first taste of the TV world.
Wow.
And it was a fix that I wanted more of. So I eventually morphed into what I'm doing. I've been doing this now for 30 years.
Were you well paid for that episode?
I was actually. The check that I got represented about half of what I would make on my salary at World Vision, and I really liked that.
Yeah. Now, in a previous interview, you'd done a script for an extraordinary story about a lady that was kidnapped by a murderer. And tell us a little bit more about that, and if people can get that on DVD now.
So that movie is called Captive, and we were so blessed. Paramount released this movie in 2015, and we were so blessed to have David Oyelowo, the incredible actor who played Martin Luther King in Selma, and Kate Mara, and Michael Kenneth Williams, who people will know from all of his work on HBO and so forth. Had some fantastic actors in this movie, and it's a true story about a man who shot up a courthouse back 10 years ago in Atlanta, took a young woman hostage in her apartment over 7 hours that same day, and she talked him into giving up. He had killed four people, a judge, a police officer, a federal agent, and a court reporter, and now he had no reason not to just go out in a blaze of glory, except for this brave young woman, Ashley Smith, who read to him from Rick Warren's Purpose-Driven Life and said, there is a purpose for you, David. You still have purpose. There's still an opportunity for you, for your life to matter. But not if you go out of here in a blaze of glory. What many people don't realize about Ashley Smith, this brave young woman, is that she was a serious crystal meth addict at the time. And that movie is about this phrase: it took a killer to save her life. And it took a drug addict with no more chances to save his. And this movie, Captive, was released in 2015. I saw it was on the plane, a United plane coming here to Orlando. It's on the menu at United. It's on DVD. It's on Netflix, I believe. It's on several places where we now can watch video on demand and so forth. But I was very honored to work on that, write and produce that movie as well.
Why I was so interested in it, besides what a great story, was this actor, and I can't pronounce his name. You'll have to do it again.
So the way you do it is David Oyelowo.
Well, what was so fascinating, Brian, is I was born in Nigeria. He was born in Nigeria. I was raised in Britain. He was raised in Britain. So one day I'm hoping to maybe interview him, and we could discuss, how different our lives are, and yet how similar.
Well, David has a great story. He's a man of strong faith himself. He was a youth pastor back before he was an actor in England. He was the star of a great show in England called Spooks, but MI5 in the United States. And he's been in many fantastic films, even beyond Selma, which was an iconic role for him to play Martin Luther King. You would like him in his current movie, United Kingdom, which is just coming out soon, and you might get a hold of him for that one, because that's a good one.
What's the storyline of that?
It's a story about I believe it's a Nigerian prince. It could be maybe one of the other countries in Africa, who marries a British woman, white British woman, and it causes such conflict for him because he's royalty in his homeland, and causes a conflict for him there because he's supposed to ascend to be king. But he's got this white wife from England, and it's a story of faith, and it's a fantastic movie. So, David Oyelowo.
Right. Well, when I was growing up many years ago, Brian, my dad was so opposed to movies. He wouldn't allow me or my sister to go to see films. It's all of the devil. And now Christians are getting, maybe one movie a week almost now. What has caused this turnaround?
Well, here's the way I see it, Dan. There's a giant media conversation going on in this world. You know this is more than anybody. And Christians can either be part of the conversation or be silent, but the conversation is going to continue with or without them. Right? And it is, unfortunately, a louder conversation than the church is having. So if we want to reach people with our worldview, not to pound them over the head with it, but just to say, if you're honestly seeking truth, you need to consider this. You need to stop here and take a look and walk away if you want, but you need to look. We have to embrace film. It's the currency, it's the language of the day, right? Everybody has their cell phones now, and they're watching content around the world on smartphones. It's the medium is the message, right? And the message is the media. Right. And if we stay silent as Christians, as people of faith, that's our problem. And it becomes the world's problem because we sell them short. They would listen to us if we could speak effectively, instead of being in our own little ghetto and talking to ourselves in an echo chamber. We can't do that anymore. We have to embrace this opportunity to speak to them, but we got to be good at it.
So what you're saying is we don't need propaganda, but we need really good stories that point to Christ.
Look, we just tell true stories. If we tell true stories, or stories that resonate with truth, are authentic to the human experience, people will listen, right? My story, your story, sometimes can point to God's story and Jesus' story. But for you to hear my story, my testimony, my story, means you also have one.
Right.
And I love... Honestly, I could just live in the world of true stories. As a former journalist, I love making movies out of true stories because I think people can relate better. It really happened, right? That thing really happened to somebody. So you put yourselves in their shoes and you go on that adventure with them, and you drink it in, right? But it has to be well done. If it's not well done, it doesn't matter at all.
Do you think that most of the Christian movies today are well done?
You know what? I see this as sort of a parallel to Christian music. When Christian music first launched, contemporary Christian music, I think it's safe to say it was just okay, right? In fact, it was probably kind of mediocre, in a lot of ways. But you can't listen to a contemporary Christian song now that has any loss of production value from anything you could hear on pop radio. It's as good from a musical art to the spoken word art that exists in anything on pop music. My goal, my hope for myself and for my colleagues who are believers working in film and TV is that Hollywood will want to knock us off. They'll want to steal our ideas, that we're so good. And the reason I can say that is because we are made in the image of the author of the universe.
Right.
The God who created everything and painted this beautiful universe and this beautiful world we live in and created that, we're made in his image. For us to do half-baked anything is a sin. It's a sin. And the church patronized it, by the way.
Sure.
Back in the Renaissance, the church was responsible for all the great art and history.
Yeah.
So what happened to the church? We need to patronize artists, and we need to patronize young filmmakers and challenge them to hit it out of the park every time.
Yeah.
And not settle for half-baked.
Yeah. Well, we've been speaking to Brian Bird. Brian, again, the movie is...
The Case for Christ.
And how can people get to see it?
The movie is coming out across theaters nationwide in North America on April 7th.
Great.
And I have to just say, go week one, because week one determines how long that movie will stay in theaters. And I believe, I'm praying for millions of eyeballs on this movie, because it's going to change lives. It's going to change hearts. And it will, and even if you're already a person of faith, it's going to be a huge booster shot for your faith, because it's going to help you have answers for what you believe, so you can share the cure for everything, which is what we have if we're believers in Jesus. We have the cure for everything.
Yeah.
We need to share the cure with everybody. It cures everything.
Right. Brian Bird, thank you so much.
Thanks, Dan. Pleasure.